What's up, everyone? How you doing? Today is July 23rd of 2022. Happy Neptunalia to everybody. So if you have your trident stowed away in your closet, feel free to whip that one out for today's stream. Today we're going to cover several news stories from the past couple weeks. Of course, the big news story yesterday, WWE head honcho Vince McMahon stepping down as CEO of the company. We'll cover this at length as we go. Also, earlier this week, President Joe Biden got the coronal virus. So we'll decode the date that he was diagnosed, how it connects to the date that he took office, etc. Also, a few weeks ago, we had the destruction of the Georgia Guidestones. It was allegedly a conspiracy theorist who initially bombed the Guidestones, and they were damaged heavily enough that it was ultimately decided that the rest of them would be taken down as well. So we'll get into the numerology of that story. A pretty interesting story, both the numerology and the synchronicity that I experienced through it, about the stabbing death of former NASCAR driver Bobby East. This is a really interesting one, and we'll dive into that. We'll take a look at the numerology of a couple other stories. The daughter of an MLB coach passed away in a boating accident a couple weeks ago. I want to take a look at that. There were some interesting numbers that popped out over and over again. A big theme throughout this video is that we just ended the time of Cancer. And Cancer, the only astrological sign ruled by the moon. We are now in Leo, the only sign ruled by the sun. So we will cover that, the water symbolism that's been repetitive with this Cancer theme. Former NFL Super Bowl champion Charles Johnson, who played with the New England Patriots, he died a few days ago. And then we had this news story with former Patriot Asante Samuel the next day. He is highly numerically connected to this story. And then perhaps at the end of this video, we'll take a little rewind and actually do a request. Someone asked about this story in the comments a couple weeks ago, about the death of Stevie Ray Vaughan in a helicopter crash back in 1990. And there is some very significant symbolism that popped up in this story, and we're going to be touching on that as well. But let's get back to the top story from yesterday, which is once again that WWE chairman and CEO Vince McMahon, the majority share owner of the company, and the guy who's credited for making the company into the billion-dollar machine that it is, stepping down amidst a number of scandals. And for those of you who haven't been following the news, Vince McMahon has been revealed to have paid $12 million to 4 different women over the past 20 or so years who he has had affairs or unsavory sexual encounters with. And now this is all coming out, and amidst all the controversy, he's decided to go ahead and step down. Last year in February, I made this post about the numerology of Vince McMahon. And I covered a few things in this post about why he's referred to as Satan himself on his programming. But I also made a distinct connection between Vincent Kennedy McMahon, again, his middle name is Kennedy, and how he is connected numerically to the assassination of John F. Kennedy. And an interesting detail about the controversy surrounding Vince McMahon is that one of the women he's alleged to have an affair with was passed around, quote-unquote, and the other executive in question is John Laurinaitis. So there's a guy named John who's also in a lot of hot water with Vince McMahon. And this makes sense because Vince McMahon is a walking JFK riddle. I want you to see how old Vince McMahon was the day after JFK died. Notice how he turned 6,666 days old the very next day. His name sums to 666. The name Kennedy McMahon would also sum to 666. Vince McMahon was the winner of the 1999 Royal Rumble, a year that has an upside-down 666 in it. And back in 2014, he launched the WWE Network, which, for the entirety of its existence, costs $9.99 per month. So there's a lot more that goes into 666 with Vince McMahon. But we'll explore how that number's coded in here. First, I want to touch on the undeniable, overwhelming, synchronicity that was in the headlines in the mainstream media at the same time that Vince McMahon was making his announcements. So once again, this man's middle name is Kennedy. And as his retirement was in the news, we had this other story that was on the headlines right next to it. And I thought this news story was pretty interesting. Here we have an entire police department in a small village in North Carolina resigning. So the same day that McMahon resigns, this whole police department resigns. And this police department was in the town of Kenly, which sounds a lot like Kennedy, or at least, has the same first syllable. And then a couple hours later, we had another news story where Bo Jackson popped up in the news, saying that he had covered the Uvalde victims' funeral costs. And this stood out also because Bo Jackson's first name is Vincent, just like Vincent McMahon. So first, let's go back to this story about Kenly, North Carolina. And the first thing I did was check out the coordinates where this city exists to see if there were connections to JFK. And look what happened. 35 and 78 were the two numbers that I was given. The 78 stands out right away because using the alphabetic order, the name Kennedy sums to 78. And this village on the 78th meridian. JFK was the 35th president of the United States, and he was the last president to be a Catholic before the current and 46th president, Joe Biden. And notice how Catholic, summing to 35 and 46 in reduction. Here, the village of Kenly, we see, is on the 35th parallel. Another Kennedy who's connected to this numerically is a former WWE wrestler who used to be called Mr. Kennedy. This guy's first name was Ken, which is probably why they went with it. But what's so interesting about this guy, he debuted in about, I think it was 2005. And what he was well known for was his introduction. He would take the ring microphone and introduce himself. And he would always say, Mr. Kennedy. And then he said Kennedy again to really drive the name home. So what I discovered here is that this man is also connected to this Kennedy riddle, just like Vince McMahon. So we'll get into this as we go. But first I wanted to mention Bo Jackson's full name. Vincent Edward Bo Jackson, with his nickname included. Notice the alphabetic ordinal value of his full name, 232. Well, that stands out because the name Vincent Kennedy McMahon, a guy who shares the same first name, also has Gematria of 232. For anyone who happens to be new to this channel, we take a mystical look at reality through the lens of numerology, a significant component of which is Gematria, the ancient practice and observation of coding numbers into words, names, and phrases. And as we commonly talk about on this channel, well, actually in every video, we look at how this connects to dates on the calendar and how it connects to when things manifest. Whether it's organic, whether it's scripted, I leave that to the viewer to decide often, but I think the conclusions are easy to come to quite frequently. Anyway, looking again at Bo Jackson, I noticed how he has trigonal gematria of 666. And this is a number that's littered all over Vince McMahon. Again, Vincent Kennedy McMahon equals 666 with reverse caps mixed. Might as well pull this out here. So, again, part of the reason I haven't been doing so many videos lately is because I've been pouring most of my energy into the website. And what we're looking at here is the current build of the new app. So I'm going to go over some features here and there. I'm not going to dive too deep because we're not that close to launch yet. But there's some really cool features, and we'll take stabs as we go. Anyway, the name Vincent Kennedy McMahon, notice in the reverse capital cipher, sums to 666. In Latin Gematria, the name Kennedy McMahon sums to 666. And using reverse Sumerian, the name Kennedy simply sums to 666. So a lot of 666 to go off of, but look at Bo Jackson's birthday. This is going to take us into the next part of the riddle. He was born on the date November 30th, 1962. And for followers of my work, you may recognize November 30th as the date of the 1331 total solar eclipse. 1331, I call this the ultimate eclipse number. It's pretty undeniable when you look at these ciphers, these basic Latin and ordinal methods that I use. So I'm going to link this post below after I'm done with this video. And the retirement of Vince McMahon was 100% a numeric riddle to the total solar eclipse code. Now, a big part of this is that Vince McMahon was embroiled in a steroid scandal back in the early 90s. He was accused of buying and distributing steroids to his wrestlers, which probably happened. I mean, look at the size of some of those guys. But check out the date that he was found not guilty, July 23rd, which is actually today's date. But what this means is that measuring from the date he was acquitted to the date that he retired as WWE chairman was exactly 28 years and 0 days. Also, scope out the year that this happened, 1994. In English Extended, or Standard Gematria, this is the Standard English method, which mirrors ancient Hebrew Gematria. The phrase total solar eclipse equals 994. And again, it was the year 1994 when Vince was in this scandal. In ancient Hebrew Gematria, the phrase for total solar eclipse has this value of 280. So exactly 28 years later and 0 days, we get the story about him retiring. Now, if you convert this measurement to days, notice how you also get 10,227. And these are the digits that are important here, 227. Consider the date of his retirement, the 22nd of July. That date is written internationally as 227. In Gematria, using the ancient Hebrew cipher, the phrase for full eclipse or total eclipse, without the solar word in between, notice how this phrase sums to 227. Measuring from the birthday of Mr. Anderson, or Mr. Kennedy, as he was known in WWE, back to the date of this story is 227 days. So there's one of his numerical connections. And then we also have Bo Jackson, who was in the news on the same day. And if you measure from his birthday to July 22nd, you get 7 months and 22 days. Of course, we're currently in the year 2022. Notice how the word eclipse has this gematria value of 222 in the English method. What if we just take the word eclipse on its own? And I believe it's this last one here for impairment or occultation. That's solar. Let me make sure I have this right. So it's going to be this word here for eclipse. Now this word, which again translates to eclipse, sums to 156. And eclipses always occur 1, 5, or 6 lunar phases after the last eclipse. In Gematria, notice how WWE sums to 156 in the Satanic method. WWE is short for World Wrestling Entertainment, which also has this 156 in reverse reduction. So then we get this story out of Kenly, North Carolina on the same day about all these police officers resigning, just like how Vincent Kennedy McMahon resigned. The town of Kenly has ordinal gematria of 67. This matches McMahon in the same method. Kenly is in the state of North Carolina, which sums to 67 in reduction. 67 is the reduction value of total solar eclipse, right here, 67. Now, in our highly significant Latin or Jewish method, which I think is the most significant method outside of the base 4, notice how this happened exactly 704 months after the assassination of JFK, the big Kennedy that this is all revolving around. Another big thing about this date, July 22nd. Notice how July 22nd is the cusp of Cancer and Leo on the zodiac. Cancer is the only sign ruled by the moon, whereas Leo is the only sign ruled by the sun. And of course, eclipses involve the moon and the sun. So the sun is the big white object in the sky, and when the moon covers it, the sun turns black. And in the Bible, this is even said as black as a sackcloth of hair. So look at the population of Kenly, North Carolina, which is clearly fake here, and I'll explain why. Notice the number of white people in this city, according to the 2020 census, 704. Well, we just explained how this number is connected to the eclipse code. Total solar eclipse 704. McMahon retiring 704 months exactly after JFK dies. What about this 503, the number of African Americans in Kenly? The phrase solar eclipse in standard gematria equals 503. And then you even go down to mixed, right? Mixed race, you get 69. The word eclipse equals 69 in the alphabetic order. I mean, these numbers appear to be a complete joke. Even look at the percentage here. 47% white, 33% black. That's the gematria of total eclipse and eclipse, 47 and 33 in reduction. Now, this 33 is a super important number to the eclipse code. Notice how the name Vincent equals 33, the first name of McMahon and Bo Jackson. The name Kennedy also sums to 33. And measuring from his retirement to his next birthday is exactly 33 days. Furthermore, he retired exactly 33 weeks after the last total solar eclipse. And if you even measure to the last total solar eclipse before that one, it was exactly 3 years and 3 weeks. And then we get this news story where their Kenly PD resigns. Kenly PD equals 33 in reduction. Consider how 33, the 33rd degree, is considered to be the highest degree in masonry, which equals 33. Police equals 33. They're risking a loss of order in the village now. Order equals 33. Pretty bizarre synchronicity here out of North Carolina, wouldn't you say? A few other interesting alignments here. Notice how Vince McMahon equals 120 in the alphabetic order. He's accused of paying out $12 million in hush money to 4 different women. And here's the headline that states that $12 million. Well, his name essentially equals 12. The word eclipse also equals 120 in the reverse alphabetic order. I want to take one more glance at the numerology of Mr. Kennedy, this wrestler that McMahon debuted back in 2005, and why he may have been handpicked to carry this name for the company. An important detail to the story here is that the new chairman of WWE, or at least one of them, is Vince's daughter, Stephanie McMahon, who was born in the year 1976. Well, Mr. Kennedy was also born in 1976. And notice how their birthdays fall 202 days apart from one another. In English Standard Gematria, the name McMahon equals 202. This is significant because total solar eclipse equals 202 in the alphabetic order. Even though Mr. Kennedy was born in Wisconsin Rapids, they billed him from Green Bay, Wisconsin, and this was probably to generate a little more heat. But notice how Green Bay, Wisconsin also has this gematria of 202. In fact, the state of Wisconsin on its own sums to 1231, which is the 202nd prime number. The name Steph equals 22 to go along with all of this. But the name Steph also equals 383, which is another prime number, the 76th prime number, the year that both of them were born. And I thought 76 was an interesting number to see over and over again because Vince McMahon is currently 76 years old. And when he retired, his tweet said he was 77 years old, or that he was approaching 77. And check out the name Kenneth Anderson, summing to both 76 and 77. So a lot to unpack there, but this is definitely a solar riddle connected to the eclipse code. And again, happening on the date that is the cusp between the one moon sign and the one sun sign. So the symbolism here has almost never been more evident, in my opinion. So, more big news this week. Joe Biden diagnosed with the big CV19. And I wanted to punch in some dates here for Joe Biden and show you why this date was so important to him and why he was diagnosed with coronavirus on the date. So Biden took office on January 20th of last year. And what we're looking at here is the new date calculator that'll be available to subscribers on the website. And once you add a date up here, you can add it to the grid down below. And this date grid makes it easy to populate any of the dates in the above two fields. So it allows you to go between dates and measurements real quickly. If you forget any date measurements that you're looking at, you can just load this grid up and find it there. So let's get into this. Let's pull up Joe Biden's Wikipedia page here. Close some of these excess tabs. Joseph Robinette Biden Jr., this man's full name. In the standard alphabetic order, as I figure out my new calculator here, notice how his name sums to 243. And what do you know? If you measure from his last birthday to his diagnosis, it was exactly 243 days. So let's punch the diagnosis date in as well. And there we see, 79 years, 243 days old. Notice how the date of his diagnosis also had primary numerology of 70, along with a life lesson number of 34. And when you write out the name Biden, it sums to 70 and 34. The disease he was diagnosed with also sums to 70 in reverse reduction. Well, what if we look at the number of days from the date that Biden took office to the date of his diagnosis? This measurement gives us 547 days. Now, this is significant because 547 is the 101st prime number, 101. And using the reverse alphabetic order, the name Biden equals 101, the word positive equals 101, the disease COVID-19 also equals 101. The word president also has these same digits, 110. But a huge part of this riddle is in the reverse alphabetic order, where the word president equals 133. This 133 gematria is also found in the word coronavirus, which sums to 1303 in Latin or Jewish gematria. And how wild is this? The two presidents who are in office during coronavirus were born a span of 1,303 days apart. Now, if you measure from March 11th, which was the date that the World Health Organization declared a global pandemic, notice how Biden's diagnosis fell a span of 133 days after March 11th, that special date to the World Health Organization. What's so important about this 133, however, is that this is also exactly 19 weeks. And of course, 19 is the number that's stamped directly into the disease. President of the United States, abbreviated as POTUS. Notice how this sums to 19, right? Well, if you measure from the date that Donald Trump was diagnosed with the CV19, check this out. So from Trump's diagnosis to Joe Biden's diagnosis, you get 1 year, 9 months, and 19 days. A double 19. So the next part of this riddle connects to the astrological sign that the sun was in. Biden's diagnosis was just 1 day before the last day of Cancer. And consider how Joe Biden's namesake, Joe Biden III, also known as Beau Biden, this man died in 2015 from cancer at the age of 46. And of course, his father would go on to become the 46th president of the United States. Notice how Beau Biden was born in the year 69. And 69 is the astrological glyph for the sign Cancer. Well, measuring from Beau Biden's birthday to his father's diagnosis was 169 days. Measuring from his death to the diagnosis was also 2,609 days. So the number 69 appears twice in both of these measurements. In fact, the word cancer sums to 44 and 152, just like Joe Biden. 44, 152. Now again, Cancer is the only sign ruled by the moon, and the moon's fall is in Scorpio, which is Joe Biden's birth sign. Scorpio's ruling planet is Mars, and the day of his diagnosis, we saw a Moon-Mars conjunction. And how weird is this? The day before his diagnosis, Joe Biden supposedly mistakenly said, "I have cancer." And a lot of people think this is another gaffe that he made while speaking. Or was this scripted into it because the sign of Cancer was so important to the riddle behind his diagnosis? Notice that when he said this, he was in the town of Somerset, Massachusetts. And this town sums to 132, which is the Latin value of Cancer, 132. So when Joe Biden was diagnosed, notice how he was on an exact lunar count, sidereal months. So from his birth to his diagnosis, the moon made exactly 1,065 orbits around the Earth. And the word diagnosed equals 165. Biden defeated Trump in the last election. Trump was born on the 165th day of the year. That's another big masonry number. Scottish Rite equals 165. With capital letters or capital numbers added, Freemasonry equals 165. Notice how when Joe Biden took office, he was exactly 1,045 lunar orbits old. And 145 is the Gematria of Joe Biden. So this shows us that lunar counts are very significant to this code. That election was also 145 days before Trump's birthday. I'm sorry, not the election, but the inauguration. So more nonsense in the media. Of course, they showed us Joe Biden with a little sniffly nose. But he'll be fine. Remember, he's quintuple vaxxed or whatever it is now. However many you're supposed to get. He's got them all. He's Joe Biden's like a Pokemon player. I think he's caught all the vaccines and boosters. Sorry, that joke sucked. All right, moving on to the next story. I want to talk about the Georgia Guidestones. A huge story, particularly in the quote-unquote conspiracy community, which I guess I'm a part of. And when I first saw this story, I had mixed emotions because over the years, I had kind of grown a little fond of the Georgia Guidestones. Like, the rocks themselves are harmless, right? Anybody with two eyes and a critical brain can see that something's wrong with world government. Something's wrong in the United States with the way the media presents reality to us. We don't need these tablets to prove that there's a conspiracy going on, but it was kind of nice to be able to point to these things and say, like, hey, who in their right mind would spend millions of dollars to erect this massive monument with this creepy stuff inscribed on it in all these languages? You know, the other part of me wanted to say, oh, maybe some vigilante went out there and blew it up. That would be cool, but no, it wouldn't. I mean, again, what are you really proving by destroying these things? Something like that would make people believe that anyone who buys into the Guidestones as a conspiracy is crazy, right? I mean, and we know what the media is doing. They want to frame people with a conspiracy mindset as crazy. So here we get a story like this. So why July 6th for the date that they were bombed and subsequently demolished? Well, we start with the very simple reverse value of the word bomb. Notice how bomb sums to 76 in reverse. Just like the date July 6th, 7/6. Now, a very significant member of the world government, or at least a figurehead of it, I have a hard time believing that George W. Bush is the mastermind behind anything that we've seen play out. But check out his birthday, July 6th, the man who was in office during the 9/11 terror attacks, which, of course, led to the Patriot Act and the expansion of federal government here in the United States. Born on July 6th. So the Guidestones brought down on his birthday. And this wasn't just any birthday for George W. Bush, but it was his 76th birthday on the date 7/6. July 6th also fell 7 months and 6 days before the Super Bowl next year. And as we make it through this post, we're going to see how the Super Bowl is connected to this riddle too. There's a big skull and bones George Bush thing going on with this year's Super Bowl. Another significant piece of this riddle is that Elbert County, where the Georgia Guidestones were located, has a telephone area code of 706. 76 is also the reverse reduction value of skull and bones. And, of course, why is this significant? Well, George W. Bush was a member of the Skull and Bones fraternity at Yale University, a detail which they very proudly display here on Wikipedia. And when we think about skull and bones, what's the number that first comes to mind? Well, that would, of course, be 322. This can also be read as a date, 322, March 22nd. Look at the date that the Georgia Guidestones were erected. March 22nd of 1980 is when they opened, 322. This upcoming Super Bowl, Super Bowl 57, falls on the date that leaves 322 days on the calendar. And don't forget that skull and crossbones, using the standard alphabetical order, equals 223. So next we're going to see how this is connected to the 9/11 eclipse code as well. So Bush was the president during 9/11, and remember, the 9/11 attacks occurred on the 11th anniversary of his father, George Bush Sr., announcing that there could be a new world order. And I'll screw you, Dallas Morning News. All right. And they call this the other 9/11, right? The date that Papa Bush said there would be a new world order, 9/11. And I always thought this was interesting because, of course, Bush Sr. was also a member of Skull and Bones, just like his son, George Bush Sr. But notice how Georgia Guidestones has this gematria of 1019, which, of course, have the same digits as 9/11. The word explosion sums to 1109 using trigonal gematria. Now, by virtue of being born on July 6th, George W. Bush is a Cancer. And he wasn't just a Cancer to the Oval Office, but a Cancer astrologically as well. And again, this is the sign ruled by the moon. Well, if you measure how old he was on the date of this explosion, notice how he was also on an exact lunar count, 1016 lunar orbits, or sidereal months. 1016, which is an upside down 9/11, and again, very similar to the gematria of Georgia Guidestones. Don't forget, 1016 is also the gematria of Ad Majorem Dei Gloriam, which is the motto of the Jesuit order, which is, of course, linked to Freemasonry, Skull and Bones, and all these other secret societies. Now, the number 9/11 is significant to the eclipse code. In the first story I talked about, we mentioned 156 because eclipses always occur 1, 5, or 6 lunar phases apart from one another. Well, the 156th prime number is 911. And in Greek isopsephy, the phrase total eclipse sums to 911. Would you believe that the Georgia Guidestones sit barely, just barely, within the path of the 2017 total solar eclipse that passed over the United States in August of that year? And, I mean, it's right on the edge of this path. Like, you can zoom in. It's maybe 2 or 3 miles inside the path. It's really, really close. Measuring from that eclipse to the destruction of the Guidestones was 1,780 days. And that stands out because July 6th is the date that leaves 178 days on the calendar. Furthermore, July 6th is also the 187th day of the year. And measuring from the death of George Bush Sr. to the destruction of the Guidestones was 187 weeks. 187, another big number to the Society of Jesus, 187, whose symbol comes from a total eclipse, which also equals 187. Remember, ancient accepted Scottish rite of Freemasonry sums to 187 in reduction? And I never made this comparison on this channel before, but whenever I saw the Georgia Guidestones, it always reminded me of the Denver International Airport. Because this airport has this bizarre monument inside of it where it claims that it was built by the New World Airport Commission, which is not a thing. That doesn't exist, right? But this is a Masonic tablet along with the date that it was, inscribed and all that. Well, measuring from the date on that plaque to the opening of the Georgia Guidestones was exactly 187 lunar phases, which is actually a pretty cool detail. Let me punch this in here. 1980. 187 sidereal months. So again, we're still looking at lunar orbits. Exactly 187 moons apart. I thought that was pretty interesting. There's definitely a connection here between these two things. So once again, looking at this total solar eclipse that passed over the Georgia Guidestones, that eclipse happened on August 21st of 2017. Measuring from that date to the date that the Guidestones opened, 13,666 days. So the 666, we know how big this is to the eclipse code. I have an entire PowerPoint presentation on this that's linked in the post. If you measure from the opening of the Denver airport, which this little, what do you call it? This tab here is installed at. From the opening of the Denver airport to the destruction of the Guidestones was exactly 9,990 days. And check out how NWO, the abbreviation for New World Order, sums to 990. Another interesting part of this riddle is that, again, we know this is connected to 9/11 through George W. Bush. Well, this next upcoming Super Bowl falls exactly 2,001 days after the eclipse that passed over the Guidestones. This represents the number 21 in numerology, which is the reduction value of moon. 666 and eclipse code both sum to 201 and 57 in reduction. And of course, this is Super Bowl 57, right? Which will be played on a date with 57 numerology. And as we've been exploring with these lunar phases, this is all connected to the moon. Notice how moon sums to 57 in ordinal. The moon has a 57-degree range of declination. And the two presidents here are the Georges, George Bush Sr., George Bush Jr. Notice how George equals 57. And I don't know why I didn't mention this up to this point, but come on, guys. Georgia, George. I mean, that's really the most obvious thing here about this here. The Super Bowl will be played on the 43rd day of the year this year. Both Bushes went to Yale University. Yale equals 43. The Georgia Guidestones even opened on a date with a life lesson number of 43. And the Guidestones would have turned 43 years old next year, so they were in their 43rd year of operation, so to speak. One more alignment I wanted to point out here. Man, if you had told me 8 years ago that people would be running for Senate or Congress on the basis of our government being satanic and evil, I probably wouldn't have believed you. But hey, here we are in 2022, and this is the type of thing that's going on. And hey, she's probably closer to the truth than anyone else in government, let's be real. But it's just wild to see. It's still a little bit surreal, right? And this Candace Taylor, she was actually running for governor of Georgia. And one of her talking points was the Georgia Guidestones. She wanted them demolished. And I thought it was interesting that she called them satanic, right? Because in satanic Gematria, Guidestones equals 523. And when they were destroyed, they were 523 lunar phases old. Let me just verify that here. Yeah, 523 lunar phases and 1 day old. I don't know, that could be a coincidence, but probably not. I mean, they knew that these things would be destroyed for a long time, I think, very obviously. All right, so we're about 45 minutes into the stream. I got a few more news stories I want to cover. A couple of these I wasn't really going to dive too deeply into anyway, so I might cut it a little short. I got stuff to do today, but I did want to talk about this, seeing as we're so heavy on the astrology today. I actually got to... Let me pull up this picture, because I want to show you guys... You know, one of the reasons I'm very guarded about my opinions on what I'm decoding when it comes to Gematria. You know, I believe very strongly that we live in what many people would consider to be a simulation of sorts. This reality that we live in, it's holographic in a sense. You know, honestly, some of the best evidence for this is the shared experience that so many people have when doing hard psychedelics, particularly something like DMT. Many people reported the same experience where reality sort of dissolves away, and you're taken into this other realm in the presence of some being of some sort. And, you know, I don't really advocate drug usage. I think if you're a happy person, there's really no reason to, but a lot of people can benefit from exploration. And that's an experience I had several years ago, and it's one I'll always remember, and one that I find to be highly congruent with my take on Gematria, which is, yes, there are powerful people with a lot of influence who intentionally code Gematria, right? They do rituals, so to speak, by the numbers. Probably to a lesser extent than I've been claiming this entire time even. But the reason that numerology is so important is because numerology guides our lives to an extent that really none of us have fully come to grips with yet. And, you know, the best evidence of this is synchronicity. And a lot of the times I start my videos talking about synchronicity for several minutes before ever even mentioning a number. Because I want to establish to people that, you know, you can experience mind-blowing things without even looking at the numerology. But the fact that there is always a significant underlying numerical riddle shows us that these things were meant to happen to some degree, or they were one of several possibilities that could happen on a given date. And again, I try to keep my opinions guarded because, hey, I'm still exploring this like many of you. But I have to share synchronicity sometimes because without doing so, I don't think it sheds a proper light on what we're looking at. So let me quick share my full screen here. And what I have is a couple of screenshots from July 12th. And this is the Discord. Of course, I have a Discord server that's linked on the website and at the end of every video. And my good friend Bobby, who I've been talking about numerology with for, 5-6 years now. You know, he sends me information quite regularly, and, you know, sometimes the information doesn't seem relevant, but then a couple days later, I'll be blown away by a sync that connects to it. And this is one of the best examples, if not the best yet. Now, recently, Rambo over at the Truth Codes, an absolutely phenomenal Gematria channel here on YouTube, has been talking about the cardinal cross, the fixed cross, in connection to the Super Bowl. And this is part of the whole George Bush, Georgia Guidestones riddle that we're looking at as well. And what he's been talking about is how each sign represents a particular direction, right? So you can take the 8 directions here and apply them to the zodiac. So Bobby, because of what Rambo's been doing over there, he's taken special attention to this and started, you know, talking to me about it a little more, making sure that I'm paying attention to it as well. So this was all on July 12th, right? He sends me screenshots of the directions, the Wheel of Fortune card, explaining how it overlaps perfectly with this, and just goes on and on to talk about the cross and directions in the zodiac, right? And again, this is Bobby who's explaining this to me. One day later, this guy gets stabbed to death in California. And his name is Bobby East. East, which is, of course, a direction. But what's so crazy about this is that he died in Westminster. Another direction. Westminster. So, I mean, I saw this and my jaw almost hit the floor. I was like, what? July 13th, one day after Bobby sends me this information, this celebrity named Bobby with a direction in his name gets stabbed to death? I mean, yeah, I could call this a hoax. I could call this fake news. I could say this guy was murdered by the cabal, but that does absolutely nothing to explain this insane synchronicity I had with it from the day before. So, you know, when YouTubers are out there saying they know everything about what's going on behind the scenes, guess what? They're full of shit. They're not. They don't know what's happening any more than anyone else does. And if they do claim this, maybe they may even be knowingly claiming it, knowing it's wrong. So things like this, seem organic to me. I can't explain it in any other way. To make this even stranger is that Westminster, where he died, was in California, and my buddy Bobby had just returned from California on vacation. So, just crazy stuff here. But now with the synchronicity out of the way, I wanted to talk about the numerology. And the big part here was east, right? The direction here in his name. And notice how east has Latin gematria of 196, right? And measuring from his date of birth to the date he died, Bobby East was 1,960 weeks old. So the 196 right there. He died on July 13th, but news of his death didn't reach the mainstream media until July 15th. And think about how that date is written, right? The 15th of July, 15/7. That date, or the date he died, was 157 days before his next birthday. 157 is also a prime number. That would be the 37th. And Bobby East was only 37 years old when he died. Notice how the name Bobby East equals 37 and 28. He was also 208 days after his birthday. It stood out to me also that the city of Westminster, where he died, has matching gematria with the man who killed him. Trent Millsap, 165 reverse. The suspect's full name, 1650 reverse Sumerian. So I talked about the synchronicity in my post as well. Consider how Bobby East, he was born on the first day of Saturnalia, so December 17th. So this means he was a Sagittarius, which is ruled by the planet Jupiter. And look at how Jupiter is currently in Aries this year for Bobby East's death. And when we transmute the zodiac to the cardinal directions, we actually find out that Aries is the sign that represents the east. So notice how if I highlight Aries, I've added this to the new calculator. It shows east as the direction. So his ruling planet was in the eastern sign when Bobby East died in Westminster. The zodiac sign that rules the chest and stomach, which is where he was stabbed, is Cancer, and he died under the sign of Cancer. So pardon here while I'm a little haphazard in my navigation of my own tools here. This is all a little bit new to me, but yeah, so he died under Cancer, which rules the chest and stomach. And the last video on my channel was about the death of Ivana Trump. And it's reported that Ivana fell down the stairs and suffered trauma to her torso, which is the chest and stomach. And now we have another story from the time of Cancer, Bobby East stabbed in the chest and stomach. When you write out Cancer, it has gematria of 118. Notice how the 118th meridian slices almost perfectly down the middle of Westminster, California, which is the city he died. Little geomancy there. The words death and homicide both sum to 118. Westminster's north-south coordinates show us a 33 on the 33rd parallel. East's birth numerology was 33. And the 33rd prime number is 137, and he died on the 13th of July, which is the date written 137. Also considered, the fact that he died on the 13th here is pretty important. He was killed at a 76 gas station, and when you add the digits 7 plus 6, they sum to 13. Furthermore, the name Bobby East equals 191 in ordinal. And, 91. The number 91 is the 13th triangular number. This is the number of days in 13 weeks. His ruling planet, Jupiter, sums to 99. He died in Westminster, which equals 990. And that's the ordinal value of 1399. Now, when you write out 13 in Latin, notice how you get this 347? Well, the city of Westminster, where he died, turned exactly 3,407 weeks old on the date of his death. And 347, by the way, this is another prime number, the 69th prime number. Westminster equals 69. And when I saw the city of Westminster, another big thing that stuck out to me is the nation's second oldest sporting event. I mean, if you want to call it a sporting event, the Westminster Kennel Club Dog Show. And the organization that runs this dog show has Gematria of 123, right? The Westminster Kennel Club, 123. Well, Bobby East's real name was Robert East, which equals 123 and 147. Excuse me. And the next Westminster Dog Show will be the 147th. So a lot of stuff there. But all of it pretty fascinating. I am going to tap into the numerology of this story here. And I wasn't totally sure why I made this post when I did make this post back on the 12th. But now that Vince McMahon has retired, it's painfully obvious why this pro wrestling theme has been so pertinent in the media lately. So, of course, I grew up a pro wrestling fan. Subscribers of this channel know that. So anytime I see a wrestling story in the mainstream media, I tend to take a glance at the numbers to see how it's connected. And this one stuck out to me because Fox News is calling the 2024 election, potentially between Biden and Trump again, a cage match rematch. Instead of just calling it a rematch or whatever, they threw this cage match term, which is kind of strange. Like, it's an election. You know, why are you giving me this image of two 80-year-old guys duking it out in the ring? I don't want to think about that. But here they put it, cage match. And again, all connected to the common news about Vince McMahon, who was in the media a lot at the time. So why July 12th for this bizarre news story about a cage match? Well, the first thing I did when I saw this story is look up the date of the first ever cage match in the history of pro wrestling. And it was way back in like 1937. And there's actually some dispute on the date, right? The two dates given are a week apart. But one of the wrestlers, Count Rossi, his name sums to 712. And that matches the date of this article, July 12th. But what stuck out also is that the word wrestling sums to 127. Also like the date, the 12th of July, 12/7. It says Republicans don't want to go to pre-Trump days, right? Pre-Trump. Notice how pre-Trump equals 127. This was also a big Cancer moon tribute. Consider how Metonic cycle equals 127 in the alphabetic order. This is the cycle that's most connected to the moon. And 127 is the 31st prime number. This article was published exactly 31 lunar orbits before Election Day. And Election Day falls on the 310th day of the year. A couple minor things here, but this is where the riddle really stands out. Check out the numerology of July 12th this year. Here we have primary numerology of 61 when we add 7 plus 12 plus 20 plus 22. We also get reduced numerology of 16, right? So 61 and 16 numerology. The word steel equals 61 and 16 in reduction. The phrase cage match equals 61 in ordinal. The word cage equals 16. This news article came out exactly 121 weeks before Election Day. Notice how with capital letters, cage match equals 121. They're also calling this a rematch, which equals 121 reverse. Also, the woman who gave this news was Kellyanne Conway, who used to work for Donald Trump. She was the counselor to the president. Notice how counselor equals 121. In Latin gematria, counselor also equals 538. And that was interesting because Joe Biden took office exactly 538 days before this news story. It was also exactly 77 weeks since Biden took office. And notice how the phrase steel cage equals 77 in ordinal. Pro wrestling equals 77 with the S exception. Trump Biden equals 770. And this was also the gematria of Jill Biden. Jill Biden is, of course, the first lady. And she was all over the news on this date, too. And not only does Jill Biden equal 77, but Jill Tracy Jacobs Biden also equals 77. Kellyanne Conway is an interesting case. It's clear to see why she was placed in the White House. Notice how she took office as senior counselor to the president on the same day that Trump was inaugurated into office, January 20th, which happens to be her birthday. So on the date that she assumed her role, she turned 50 years old. And of course, the name Donald equals 50 in the alphabetic order. Measuring from the date that Trump lost the election to the date of this news story with Kellyanne Conway, it was exactly 88 weeks. And notice how Trump equals 88. It also stuck out to me that the date of this first ever cage match was the 25th of June, or 25/6. And steel cage match equals 256. That's also the 176th day of the year, and pro wrestling equals 176. So, talk about nonsense. A cage match for the election? Really, Fox News? A cage match? Damn you so silly, Fox. All right, so I do want to take a glance at this news story from a couple weeks ago, actually July 4th. Kind of digging into the vault here today on this super stream, but hey, the blog's been a little thin until the website gets done. And, you know, hey, building a large-scale web app, mostly on your own. I am getting help with styling and a couple things with WordPress, but it's a lot of work. So think of it as like a book that I'm writing. Again, I still plan to launch in August, next month. I don't know for sure if that's completely realistic. The good news is that once the new Gematrinator calculator is launched and we're up and running, improvements, additions, like the next phases of the calculator, we'll be able to roll those out a lot quicker. Getting this framework established and everything working together, you know, building the bones of the operation isn't the difficult part. It's snapping the bones together, making sure they don't squeak and squeal, getting them to function perfectly. That's the tricky part. So even though almost everything is built, as I've been demonstrating in these tools, there's still a lot of behind-the-scenes things that really need to come together. You know, security, safety, things like that, things that I'm not really used to working on. So again, I don't want to ask for money until everything's done and I have a product that I'm proud to bring people. But yeah, this is where people will be able to support this channel, my work, as well as gain access to some pretty kick-ass decoding tools that'll help you guys out with your blogs, your YouTube videos. I just want to make the ultimate website for helping to share numerology. That's really the goal of this. So I hope everybody's as excited as I am, which is probably not likely, but yeah. So anyway, with that out of the way again, Mark Budzinski. So this guy is a coach for the Toronto Blue Jays currently. And he took a few days off earlier this month because his daughter died in a tubing accident. Really sad story. This happened in Virginia. And some interesting numbers stood out about this, particularly the game that the Blue Jays played that day that they honored the coach and his daughter. So first, let's start with the Gematria of Mark Budzinski, which equals 193 in reverse. And this 193 matches the name of the team that he is currently the manager of, Toronto Blue Jays, which equals 193. Now, the number 193 is a big prime number, the 44th prime number. His daughter was only 17 years old when she passed away. Notice how the word 17 equals 44 in reverse reduction. Her death occurred in the time of Cancer. And Cancer is a water sign. So we commonly get big water stories in the news during this month. Notice how Cancer also equals 44 in the alphabetic order, just like the word kill. The Blue Jays entered, so... Oh, okay. Let me understand this here. So Julia died on July 2nd. And on that date, the Blue Jays played a doubleheader against the Tampa Bay Rays. And that second game was rescheduled from a rainout on April 4th, which was 4-4. Again, this was the same day that that girl died in connection to the number 44. The Blue Jays lost that game by a score of 11-5. And in Gematria, the name Budzinski, the coach's name, equals 115. Don't forget, this is the Gematria of killing in both reverse and Latin, 115. Furthermore, the Blue Jays entered that day and left that day with 44 wins. So they failed to win either game. So they were stuck at 44 throughout this whole date. And again, Cancer is the one moon sign on the zodiac. This happened 44 lunar phases after Budzinski was hired into the Blue Jays staff. In Hebrew Gematria, the word for moon equals 218. His daughter died 218 days after the anniversary of his hiring, which was in the year 2018. And the word death has standard Gematria of 218 as well. According to articles about the passing, she died while she was tubing in the river. And notice how tubing equals 73. This is another big number connected to death. Sacrifice, 73. Ritual sacrifice, 73 reduction. Well, the next day after her death, on the date 7-3 or July 3rd, the Blue Jays lost again, this time by a score of 7-3. And look at the year that Mark Budzinski was born in. He was born in the year 73. This is currently the Toronto Blue Jays' 46th season in Major League Baseball. Notice how the word sacrifice gives us this 46 value in reduction. As mentioned earlier, Cancer is connected to the number 69 through its glyph. The name Budzinski has Sumerian Gematria of 690. His daughter's name, Julia Budzinski, equals 69. She died in the James River, which equals 69. Her death even fell a span of 6,909 days after her father's Major League debut, which was back in the year 2003. The number 69 also connected to the eclipse code, right? Obviously, because the word eclipse equals 69. If I'm not mistaken, eclipse of the sun equals 69 in reduction. And think about the team that the Blue Jays were playing throughout this entire thing. The Tampa Bay Rays, right? The Rays, which have the ray of the sun in their logo. And the tribute that occurred on the field to Julia even occurred on a Sunday. Of course, Tampa and Tampa Bay also have overlap with the words eclipse, total eclipse. Julia died 210 days after the last total solar eclipse. The name Julia Budzinski and Mark Budzinski both equal 210. Numbers connected to the moon. Budzinski's full name, Mark Joseph Budzinski, even sums to the 21st triangular number. 21 connecting to the moon, the number of days from the moon blockage of the sun, and all this here. There's even more. The name Julia Budzinski has gematria of 666, which is the sum of the sun's magic square. Her name also equals 93. The sun's said to be 93 million miles from Earth. Her father's name sums to 111, which is what every row and column of the sun's magic square sums to. His daughter Julia was born on October 11th, a date that has 3 ones in it. Also consider the width of the sun, approximately 864,000 miles. The name Budzinski equals 864 in Latin. One more death connected to the sports world that I wanted to touch on briefly here before I wrap this video up. Charles Johnson, a former wide receiver with the New England Patriots, actually has a Super Bowl ring with the team, even though he did not play in the game. Johnson died at the age of 50 back on July 19th. And we're going to see how this is connected to Tom Brady and this upcoming Super Bowl, which Brady may very well be playing in with the Buccaneers. Tom Brady will be turning 45 years old in another week and a half. An incredibly old age for someone to be playing in the NFL. Consider how the name Thomas Brady equals 45. He's technically a junior. Tom Brady Jr. also equals 45. Brady won most of his Super Bowls with New England. Notice how New England has 45 in both reduction methods. So does the number 13. 13 equals 45 in both reduction methods. Charles Johnson was born on the date January 3rd, which is a lot like the number 13. Measuring from his birthday to the date he died was 197 days. The number 197 is the 45th prime number. The date of his death was also the 19th of July, the date that can be written 19/7. Charles Johnson was born on and died on dates with numerology of 23. The Super Bowl that he has a ring for was played on the date February 3rd, written 2/3. It was actually the first Super Bowl to ever be played in the month of February, thanks to the 9/11 attacks. This date can also be written as 3/2, like the 3rd of February. Now, look at how we write 36 in numerals, right? Super Bowl 36, the one that he played in. 36 sums to both 23 and 32, just like the date that the game was played on. But check out these other numbers. 103 in ordinal, or 31. This connects us to Charles Johnson's birthday, 1-3 or 3/1. In Latin Gematria, the Roman numerals for 36 sum to 1609. Charles Johnson died 169 days before his 103 birthday. Meanwhile, in standard, 36 sums to 2209, which in numerology represents the 50th prime number. 50, just like the age he was when he passed away. There's also a lot of connections to the phrase wide receiver, which sums to 198 in reverse. Including the end date, he died 198 days after his birthday. Notice how the name Charles Johnson has matching 185 Latin gematria with wide receiver. In reduction, wide receiver has double gematria of 72. So does Super Bowl 36 with the Roman numerals used, 72 and 72. He played for New England, which equals 702. He was born in the year 72. And he died 7 weeks and 2 days before the start of the NFL season. But here's another wild connection here to the Super Bowl. When you write out Super Bowl 36 as it's spelled, notice this Latin gematria of 2503. 2503 represents the 22nd triangular number. And the game was played in the year 2002. And now this man has died in the year 22. Measuring from the Super Bowl to the date of his death was exactly 253 lunar phases. How wild is that? Also, his death fell exactly 28 weeks after his birthday. Not exactly, my bad. In that same Latin method, his full name sums to 2080. And he died 208 days before the upcoming Super Bowl, which is again the 57th Super Bowl, played on a date with 57 numerology. Charles Johnson was born exactly 5 years and 7 months before Tom Brady. And notice how the name Johnson equals 570, all connected to upcoming Super Bowl 57. A couple more connections here. His full name equals 94, so does his last name. Super Bowl 36 equals 94. So does ritual human sacrifice, if you wish to believe that's what this was, which it could have been, I guess. I don't know. The name Charles Johnson and Charles Everett also have matching 217 gematria with New England Patriots. And it's fitting that I ended the post with this number 217 because a couple days later, we got a news story from Asante Samuel, a former New England Patriot, whose full name sums to 217. This news story made headlines on the 21st of July, the date written 21/7. Notice this article's life lesson number of 34, syncing up with Asante T. Samuel, which sums to 34. I thought it was interesting that Bill Belichick, the coach of the Patriots, whom Samuel was criticizing in this article, check out his birthday, April 16th. Measuring from the date of this news story, the 21st of July, to Bill Belichick's next birthday is 269 days. And 269 is the reverse value of New England Patriots. So his birthday is connected to both the ordinal and reverse gematria of the team he coaches, which is pretty cool. But this 269 is actually the 57th prime number. And I just talked about 57, right? The number stamped on the Super Bowl, the number that connects Charles Johnson to Tom Brady. Notice how Arizona Cardinals equals 217 as well. That's the team that'll be hosting this year's Super Bowl. Asante Samuel, just like Charles Johnson, was born in early January, making both men Capricorns. And Capricorn is the astrological symbol represented by the goat. Consider how Tom Brady is often referred to as the GOAT, the greatest of all time. Capricorn is part of the cardinal cross on the zodiac. And Bill Belichick is an Aries, which is also part of that same cardinal cross. And I thought it was interesting that Goats, Cardinals, and Patriots all have matching 248 Gematria in various methods. This news story with Asante Samuel came out 197 days after his birthday, just like how Charles Johnson died 197 days after his. Once again, that's the 45th prime number, a big number there. Not a whole lot more I wanted to dive into. This is a pretty pointless news story to decode, but again, showing how all of these things are connected to one another. As far as this story on Stevie Ray Vaughan, I'm actually going to put this in a separate video later. I want to revive my Decoding the Past series, which I started last year and then abruptly ended immediately, like I often do with a lot of my projects. But I have this super important calculator project to finish up to make sure that I have an income again, because I'm getting broke here. And, I'll make the sales pitch in a future video, but I was making a lot of money with GE, and I threw away that whole life to try and make money with Gematria, teaching this, providing tools to help people decode. I don't know if it'll work. I hope it does. I think it will. I have faith it will. But it's going to take a little luck, I guess. There's certainly enough people visiting the website to make it worthwhile. But, I apologize in advance if people who don't want to subscribe to the calculator see some ads pop up in the coming months. But again, I gotta eat, just like all of you. And after I make this website live, I'm going to be doing a significant amount of more Gematria work. Probably 2, 3, 4 videos a week, if not more, depending on what kind of rhythm I fall into. But yeah, I don't want to harp too much more on this. I'm just really excited about finally getting this live. One thing that's really cool about this calculator is that it saves all of your settings, and there's multiple presets that you can have at any given time. So you'll see here, like if I add ciphers, right? And if I save these as my defaults, when I refresh the page, those same ciphers will be there. Hopefully this works. Yeah, see, they're all there. And if at any time I want to pull up a different table, I can go to any one of my presets and pull them up just by typing in the shortcuts. So this is one of my favorite things. Also, your history. Every time you come back, your entire history will be there. Or at least the last 500 terms that you've entered. So often, I've entered the calculator and seen a number that I knew I just saw, but I didn't know where I saw it. Well, now, as long as it was one of the last 500 terms you entered, you will always have access to it. So if I want to look for the number like 217, boom, there it is. Charles Johnson, New England Patriots, Asante Samuel, right? We just saw those numbers. And this, to me, this is so good. This proves how awesome Gematria is. Think about this, guys. I have 260 terms in this table, right? You can scroll through and see for yourself. 260 terms in this table. And out of everything in this table, there's only 3 of them that sum to 217. And all of them have to do with the news story that we just looked at. That was published on the 21st of July. What are the odds of that? I mean, forget the fact that these 3 names sum to 217. How wild is it that, only 1 in 100 of the terms in the database that I've entered have this Gematria? I mean, this is the kind of thing that, to me, just, starts to blow the idea of coincidence out of the water. We're really looking at something phenomenal here. Also, you can move phrases up and down, right? So let's say you're trying to take a screenshot and you want to move something all the way up. You can move it to the top. You can shift the phrase down. You can also move it to the different tables. So in addition to the user history, there's also 4 personal tables. And these tables will save no matter what until you overwrite them. So for instance here, I got some bugs to clean up. Obviously, we're not live yet. But yeah, you can move phrases from table to table, search your personal saved tables. And then on the date calculator, any of these dates that you enter, when you refresh, they should still be there. So any dates that you've been looking at recently, you're able to pull up. It saves like the last 100. And then, of course, you have all the planet counts, Mercury through Pluto, all the moon phases. I'm so fucking happy to have this thing almost done. You guys don't even know. And decoding, we're just going to take it to the next level again, just like we've been doing for the last few years here. But this is really going to blow it out of the water. All right, so we've gone way over time here, almost at an hour and a half, but it felt good to do a nice long live stream for a change. Shout out to everybody who hung out in the chat till the end of the stream. I know it's not easy listening to me shout about numbers for a long time, so yeah, this is pretty cool. And shout out to everybody who's giving thanks and shout outs in the chat. All of you are awesome. Some of you are weird, but all of you are awesome. Love everybody who follows the channel and the work. So thanks again. I'm going to wrap up the stream. Peace, love, God bless, and we'll talk to you all real soon. See ya.